Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. Indian forces have martyred 5 more civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The youths were targeted during military raids in Shopia and Islamabad districts. The occupying forces have martyred over 300 Kashmiris since revocation of the territory status on 5th of August 2019. India has yet again reported record single-day COVID-19 cases of nearly 153,000 and 5-month high deaths of over 800. In Pakistan, 114 people died while over 5,000 contracted the disease overnight. The country's death toll has surged to 15,443, while its caseload has topped 721,000. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.9 million lives and infected more than 135 million. In Myanmar, pro-democracy activists have taken to the streets across the country a day after security forces shot at 80 more civilians. The protesters displayed 3-finger salutes to condemn the military regime and wore black to mourn those killed. Nearly 700 protesters have been killed in the military crackdown since the February 1st coup. In China, 29 miners have been trapped in a coal mine that flooded in northwest China's Xinjiang region. State media says so far 8 of them have been rescued uninjured. It adds all the trapped miners have been located and a rescue operation is underway. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. Indian forces have martyred 5 more civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The number of the martyred youths in the territory has risen to 12 in the past 72 hours. The youths were targeted during a military raids in Shopia and Islamabad districts. Earlier, Indian troops martyred 7 Kashmiris in separate cordon and search operations in Shopia and Pulwama districts. The authorities have snapped internet services in Shopia, Kulgam and Islamabad districts. Kashmiri leaders of all the parties' Hurriyat conference have slammed the latest surge in extrajudicial killings of Kashmiris. The occupying forces have martyred over 300 Kashmiris since the revocation of the territory status on 5th of August 2019. India has yet again reported record single-day COVID-19 cases of nearly 153,000 and 5-month high deaths of over 800. Brazil and Mexico have reported more than 2,000 deaths each from COVID-19 overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 2.9 million lives and infected over 135 million. Details in this report.
As the vaccine drives get stumbled due to one reason or another, the number of fatalities continues to aggressively grow. The University of Washington Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluations model has predicted around 618,000 people will have died from coronavirus in the U.S. by August 1st, meaning 100,000 more deaths in the country in less than 4 months. The situation is equally grim in the south. Peru registered a record number of nearly 400 deaths overnight as health workers battle a shortage of medical oxygen and saturated hospitals. The Archbishop of Chile's capital, Santiago, has been hospitalized after testing positive for the coronavirus. Celestino Eos had received both doses of the Sinovac vaccine. Colombia's capital, Bogota, has implemented new restrictions, including a 3-day lockdown in a bid to curb the third wave. Experts warn, given the behavior of citizens, they can potentially have 3 waves of the virus every year, for an indefinite period of time.
Compared with other countries in the region, we are quite behind in terms of vaccinations. We have a good network of services, one of the best in Latin America in terms of the ability to serve people. But we have undisciplined people who do not abide by the measures, so we expect the waves of contagion will follow, and we will have 2 or 3 waves per year from here, indefinitely.
Leading scientists have warned that the UK government is risking the third wave by easing the lockdown, at a time when official data still shows virus hotspots across many parts of the country. Meanwhile, France will lengthen the period between the first and second shots of messenger RNA vaccines to 6 weeks from 4 weeks to accelerate the inoculation campaign. Pressure remains acute in hospitals, transfers a precious tool for saving lives. But with hospital visits allowed, families do not want patients to be transferred to other cities.
There's a big difference between the first and second wave and now, which is that now families are authorized to visit their loved ones in hospital. I can go see him, so there's a link. So it's much more difficult to convince families to transfer patients. But still we need these transfers.
A real-world data studied in Israel has found the variant discovered in South Africa can break through Pfizer vaccine to some extent.
Pakistan has recorded 114 deaths from COVID-19 overnight, its highest single-day toll during the third wave. The health ministry says over 5,000 tested positive for the virus in the past 24 hours. The ministry said that the toll has jumped to 15,443. It said out of over 721,000 cases so far, more than 631,000 have recovered. The number of active cases is now approaching 74,000, with over 4,000 in critical condition. The country's positivity ratio stands at 10.96%. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi is visiting Germany along with a delegation on an official 3-day trip. The Foreign Office says his German counterpart Heiko Maas has invited him. In a statement, it said Qureshi will hold delegation-level talks with Maas at the Federal Foreign Office. The office added he will also call on the President of the Bundestag, Wolfgang Schäuble. The two sides will review the entire spectrum of Pakistan-Germany relations and discuss ways to deepen cooperation. It said Qureshi's visit to Germany is part of regular high-level exchanges between the two countries. In Myanmar, pro-democracy activists have taken to the streets across the country a day after security forces shot dead 82 more civilians. The protesters displayed 3-finger salutes to condemn the military regime and wore black to mourn those killed. The demonstrators also carried Eugenia as a symbol of triumph and defiance in Chiang Mai, Thazi town. Calling the recent violence a genocide, protest organizers said the military is shooting even at shadows it suspects. More than 700 people have been killed by the military since the February 1st coup. In Yemen, the Arab coalition says it has destroyed Houthi drones launched towards the Saudi kingdom. The Saudi state media says the explosive-laden drones were aimed at the southern cities of Khamis Mushat and Jazan. The coalition said it would take necessary operational measures to protect civilians in line with international law. However, the Houthis claim to have hit their intended targets. In a tweet, Houthi spokesman Yahya Saria said the military targeted Jazan airport and a military airbase in Khamis Mushat with 2 drones. The Saudi-led military coalition has been battling the Houthi movement since it ousted Yemen's government in 2015. Egypt and Sudan have rejected an Ethiopian proposal to share data on the operations of its dam on the Blue Nile. This comes after the latest round of talks between the 3 countries in Kinshasa ended without progress. Sudan's irrigation ministry said Ethiopia's offer implies suspicious selectivity in dealing with what has been agreed upon. Meanwhile, in an interview, Egypt's irrigation minister said his chief concern is drought management. Addis Ababa has again invited the 2 sides to nominate dam operators for data exchange before the dam's filling. But Cairo and Khartoum say they are seeking a legally binding agreement over the dam's operations. South Korean Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun has departed for Iran for bilateral talks. The visit comes amid lingering tension over Tehran's call to unlock its fund frozen by Seoul under the U.S. sanctions. During the three-day visit, Chung is scheduled to meet with Iranian First Vice President Ishaq Jahangiri. He will also hold talks with other political leadership of Iran. This is the first visit by a South Korean premier in 44 years and comes 2 days after Iran released a seized Korean oil tanker. Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin has warned against a spiral back into sectarian conflict in Northern Ireland. A week-long streak of unrest continues in the country, with 14 police injured in the latest night of clashes, taking the toll to 88. The Premier said the future generations must not return to sectarian murders and political discord. Disorders sparked in pockets of Belfast, with petrol bombs being hurled at police officers. Violence has erupted over growing frustration among pro-British unionists on post-Brexit trade barriers. Parts of the region remain deeply split 23 years after the Good Friday peace deal. Many nationalists aspire to unify with Ireland, while unionists want to stay in the United Kingdom. Britain and the US have asked Russia to de-escalate tensions in eastern Ukraine. British Foreign Secretary says he and the US Secretary of State firmly oppose Russia's campaign to destabilize Ukraine. Dominic Raab said Russia must live up to the commitments that it signed up to at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. In a tweet, Raab reaffirmed staunch support to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Earlier, the head of the leading faction of the EU Parliament called for tougher sanctions against Russia. Manfred Weber said large-scale freezing and disconnection of Russian from SWIFT accounts should become a real option. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has also voiced his support for Ukraine's sovereignty while demanding peace in the Black Sea. In Kyrgyzstan, voting in a referendum is underway to choose between a presidential or parliamentary system of governance. Independent polls reveal voters are likely to support handing greater powers to the presidency. The constitutional reform will make regional policy execution for Kyrgyz President Sadr Japarov easier. Neighboring Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan also have presidential systems. The verdict will become a constitutional obligation only if the turnout in the referendum is over 30%. In Serbia, thousands have protested outside the parliament in Belgrade against the government's inaction to prevent pollution. With banners in their hands, the demonstrators came to Belgrade from across the country. Protest leader Alexander Jovanovic told the crowd that investors are welcome in the country, but they cannot poison children. In recent years, Serbia has started selling its mining resources to foreign companies, despite opposition by the locals. As it seeks to join the EU, Serbia will need billions of euros of investment to meet the bloc's environmental standards. Funeral preparations for Britain's Prince Philip, who died on Friday, are underway in Windsor Castle. The ceremonial royal funeral will be held at St. George's Chapel on the 17th of April. Buckingham Palace said the number of mourners will be limited to 30 at the funeral. Prime Minister Boris Johnson will not attend the funeral to make space for as many family members as possible. In a statement, Downing Street said Johnson wants to act in accordance with what is the best for the royal household. The palace has confirmed that Prince Harry will be attending the funeral without his wife. Meghan Markle, who is pregnant, will not make the trip from the US on medical advice. In Ecuador, voters are set to cast their ballot in the presidential runoff today. This comes amid longing debate whether the country's economic issues can be best treated through socialism or market-friendly policies. The nationwide ballot distribution took place under the careful watch of the military. Pre-runoff polls indicate socialist Andres Arauz with the lead over his rival and free market advocate Guillermo Lasso. Arauz won the first-round election in February with 32.7% of the vote. A victory for him now will further consolidate a string of leftist electoral victories in South America. In Peru, ballots are being distributed in polling stations as the country prepares to vote for a new president. But the COVID-19 pandemic has diminished the usual buzz surrounding the elections. This report has the details.
Peru battles the peak of COVID-19 cases with hospitals overwhelmed. Moreover, the voting comes in the wake of last year's constitutional crisis and political scandals. Ballots were distributed amid tight security by the National Police Force.
The National Police is providing the security escort of the trucks that are going to distribute the electoral material. Each truck is escorted with a patrol car with its respected crew. In order to accompany them, provide security during transportation and security during distribution of this electoral material in each of the polling stations.
As candidates close their campaigns, pollsters say half a dozen of them are still in the running for the top 2 spots. The government has mobilized massive machinery to ensure the elections are held smoothly.
200 trucks are leaving these premises, accompanied by 200 patrol cars. We are sending 20 trucks to Callao, 180 trucks to Lima's metropolitan area to transport the material during the next 12 hours, constantly to 3,000 polling stations. In total, we are mobilizing 450 tons of material.
In the final pre-election polls, Keiko Fujimori, the daughter of ex-president Alberto Fujimori, has climbed to the top. But pollsters say voters were disenchanted with all candidates, giving rise to more radical positions.
More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. China says it is willing to work with Brazil to promote its comprehensive strategic partnership. Foreign Minister Wang Yi renewed the pledge in a phone call with his Brazilian counterpart, Carlos Alberto Franco Franca. Chinese state media said Wang termed the two sides important forces in driving forward global multipolarization. Wang said the two sides should actively expand cooperation in 5G, digital economy, artificial intelligence, and other fields. He added Beijing believes Brasilia will provide a fair and open business environment for Chinese firms operating in Brazil. Franca said Brazil aims to further strengthen the ties and carry out long-term cooperation with China. In China, 29 miners have been trapped in a coal mine that flooded in northwest China's Xinjiang region. State media says so far 8 of them have been rescued uninjured. It said all the trapped miners have been located and the rescue operation is underway. The flooding occurred when the Fengyuan mine was undergoing a technological upgrade. Local authorities said the accident has cut off power and communication systems, which has complicated the rescue operation. In Indonesia, the death toll from the earthquake on the main island of Java has risen to 8. Officials said more than 1,300 buildings have been damaged in a 6.9 magnitude quake. 5 died in Malang district and 3 bodies were retrieved in Lumajang district. The disaster management officials have warned people to stay away from slopes of soil or rocks to avoid landslides. This was the second deadly disaster to hit Indonesia this week. Last Sunday, tropical cyclone SEROJA killed at least 174 people and left 48 still missing in East Nusa Tenggara province. Tropical cyclone SEROJA has strengthened off the western Australian coast. The Emergency Services Department has broadened a warning to immediately take shelter to several towns. 5 coastal towns are put on red alert given high winds and the prospect of coastal flooding. The department has also evacuated residents of Denham and Shark Bay, 500 kilometers north of Perth. It said there is a possible threat to lives and homes as the cyclone approaches land. The Bureau of Meteorology said Category 3 cyclone is rapidly moving southeast, but is likely to weaken to Category 2 prior to making landfall. It said wind gusts of 150 kilometers an hour are expected. In the U.S. state of California, 4 dead gray whales have washed ashore on San Francisco Bay Area beaches in 9 days. Marine Mammal Center in California said 2 of them died from blunt force trauma from ship strikes. Meanwhile, an investigation is ongoing on the other two giant aquatic mammals. The center says common causes of gray whale deaths include starvation, climate change, and becoming entangled in fishing nets. The population of around 27,000 gray whales is protected by the Marine Mammal Protection Act in the United States. Egypt has unveiled a recently discovered city in Luxor. The discovery of the lost city has given an interesting insight into the daily lives of the people of the Golden Age. Details in this report.
An ancient Egyptian city buried under sands for 3 millennia has been unearthed by archaeologists. Renowned Egyptologist Zahi Hawass and his team began searching for a mortuary temple near Luxor in September, but ended up finding the mud brick formations of the lost city, having been only partly excavated. It is presumably the largest ancient city to be ever uncovered in Egypt. Archaeologists are optimistic that further important finds would be revealed from the discovery.
We believe that this golden lost city is the most important discovery after the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun. I call it golden because it was found in the golden age of Egypt, 1391 BC. I called it lost city because it was lost. No one really believed that the city could exist here.
The well-preserved city has almost complete walls and rooms filled with daily life tools along with rings, scarabs, and colored pottery vessels. Archaeologists say the discovery sheds light on the beginning of the worship of the ancient god Aten.
The discovery of this city has given us insight into the daily lives of ancient Egyptians. We've always believed that ancient Egyptian culture was one of death and resurrection. But now we know these details about the lives of the ancient Egyptian. We found containers that were for aged meat. We found items that have given us the history of this area belonging to Amenhotep III. And this is where the worship of Aten began, before the worship of Akhenaten. And this changes history. This discovery is important for Egyptian history because it adds volumes to Egypt's history.
According to historical references, the site once housed 3 of Amenhotep III's palaces and the empire's administrative and industrial center. The 9th Pharaoh's empire from 1386 to 1349 BC stretched from the Euphrates River in modern Iraq and Syria to Sudan.
Bitcoin has soared above the $60,000 mark again to approach record highs. The world's biggest cryptocurrency hit its highest in nearly a month, reaching $61,222. The rise comes amid talk of constrained new supplies against the evidence of wider adoption. Bitcoin first crossed the $60,000 mark on March 13th, hitting a record $61,781. Its stunning gains have been driven by its mainstream acceptance as an investment and a means of payment. Earlier, Tesla Incorporation invested around $1 billion in Bitcoin and started accepting it as a payment for its cars. Now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.